heart rhythm problems, new or worsening high blood pressure, new cancers, and tumor lysis that can result in kidney failure, irregular heartbeat, and seizure can occur. Diarrhea commonly occurs. Drink plenty of fluids. Tell your doctor if you experience signs of bleeding, infection, heart problems, persistent diarrhea, or any other side effects.
I'm living longer with Imbruvica.
Ask your doctor if it's right for you. Learn how we could help you save on Imbruvica.
Well, minutes ago, CDC advisors signed off on the approval of Moderna's COVID vaccine on a vote of 13-0. The FDA gave its official approval on Monday. Well, now, Moderna needs just the final nod from the CDC director to make a full approval official.
Moderna had been allowed under an emergency use authorization. A CDC official pointed out that research suggests some people may be more willing to get vaccinated following full FDA approval.
All right. The 2022 Winter Olympics are officially now underway in Beijing. The 2 weeks of competition are taking place in a complicated geopolitical climate. The pandemic is lingering over the Games. China is restricting athletes to an Olympic bubble and limiting the number of spectators at venues.
The U.S. and several allies are engaging in a diplomatic boycott over China's human rights abuses, but the Russia-China partnership is on full display. Chinese President Xi Jinping stood shoulder to shoulder with Russia's Vladimir Putin at their meeting ahead of the opening ceremony. Joining us now is CNN's Stephen Zhang live in Beijing. Stephen, these are all unusual dynamics on full display. So what's happening?
Well, Allison, it played out probably most directly in my own experience attending the opening ceremony as a spectator. Just to be eligible to go, you had to be in Beijing for 14 days before the event, fully vaccinated and boosted, and taking 4 COVID tests, 2 before and 2 after the event. Then on the day, it was multiple security checks, a lot of walking and waiting inside a security bubble before you even reach the stadium. Then seated outdoors for 4 hours in temperature as low as 15 degrees Fahrenheit. Of course, the show was spectacular, directed by one of China's most famous movie directors, a lot of pageantry, fireworks, combining cultural elements with high-tech presentations. But one thing that really struck me is for a government that's been lashing out at the U.S. for quote-unquote politicizing the Games by launching that diplomatic boycott, they seem to be sending a lot of very political messages with their state TV announcers calling the self-governed democratic Taiwan China Taipei, really implying Beijing's sovereignty over the island. And then, of course, selecting a Uyghur athlete to be a torchbearer to light up the Olympic cauldron at a time when the U.S. is accusing China of committing genocide against Uyghurs. Then, of course, as mentioned, Putin being Xi's most important VIP guest, probably as a reflection of that, when the Russians walked out for the athlete parade, I heard a lot of Chinese audience cheering, but when the Americans walked out, it was noticeably quiet, with the Chinese spectators next to me, for no apparent reason, just commenting out loud. The Americans are always so arrogant, so it seems it's just really difficult to separate politics from sports at these games. Allison and Victor?
Okay, Stephen Zhang, thank you for all of that. With us now, we have CNN political and national security analyst David Sanger. He's a correspondent for the New York Times, and CNN political analyst Josh Rogin. He's a columnist for the Washington Post. Great to see both of you. David, this President Xi and Putin, optically them standing shoulder to shoulder, and then they announced this strategic partnership and close friendship, I think, might have been their words. And they're going to be working together, they say, on space, on climate change, on artificial intelligence. How concerning should this be?
Well, it's pretty fascinating, and it tells you, Allison, that the geopolitical gymnastics that we've seen here have really been the big opening show of the Olympics. They turned out a very lengthy document that talked about a lot of areas where they could work together. It was not a full military alliance, but it was exactly what Nixon and Kissinger were trying to avoid when the U.S. opened its relationship with China so many decades ago. It was this nexus of a sort of anti-U.S. resistance movement. The politics of it are quite different now because China is really the superior member of this group economically, militarily, strategically. It's got some risks for Putin. I'm sure he's happy right now, particularly as he's threatening Ukraine, to have a close friend there, but he also wants to make sure that Russia is not the junior partner in this relationship. So it's not quite the slam dunk it might look like on TV.
Josh, let's drill down specifically on this in the context of what's happening on Ukraine's border. They put out this statement, Xi and Putin, where they say, quote, friendship between the two states has no limits. If the U.S., if the West, NATO, they're reading this and they're trying to come up potentially with sanctions that will hurt Russia, what's it mean now to have China there with a no limit to their support of Russia?
Right. Well, Victor, I think David's right that there are real differences between what's in this document and what is likely to happen between Russia and China over the next few years, for the simple reason that, you know, these two countries, while they have an interest, an overlapping interest in opposing us and creating a world that's safe for their autocracy and thuggery and, you know, corruption, et cetera, in the end, they're more worried about each other. And, you know, document or no document, you know, when the Russians look south, they see a problem. And when the Chinese look north, they see an opportunity. And, you know, we should see this really as a propaganda document. They're joining their propaganda together. But they're always going to be frenemies. They're always going to have opposing interests because the way I think of it is like two mafia families, right? They're like, they can work together to sort of cooperate to combine their criminal organizations, but in the end, they can't trust each other and they don't trust each other. So we shouldn't ignore it, but we shouldn't hype it up too much because that's what it's meant to do. It's meant to sort of hype up an alliance that at its core is based around two men who want to make sure that they keep their own power and want to make sure that freedom and democracy don't spread to the people that they lord over.
It's been pretty fascinating to analyze the propaganda lately this week, David, particularly that elaborate video that the Pentagon officials say that Russia was going to prepare, and that is, you know, a false flag operation of some kind, that where actors were hired and fake explosions were going off, and they were going to try to make it appear, if we believe the American officials, and why wouldn't we, that Ukraine was the instigator, and that, you know, Russia was only responding to Ukraine's aggressions. And so obviously there's more questions to be asked about this video, but so that's one level of propaganda. And then we also saw, and I don't have a picture of it to show you, but we saw President Putin when at the Olympic Games, when Ukraine came out, he pretended to be asleep. He was sleeping for a few minutes, which is, I would say, low-level propaganda, but still notable. Like Z's might as well have been coming out of his mouth at that moment. And it's just been interesting to watch all of this, but it doesn't seem like anything's de-escalating.
It certainly doesn't. And in fact, if you look at the troop formations around the Ukraine border, if anything, they're bringing in more, including, we're told, some significant missile units in Belarus that could strike in Kiev or other parts of the country. I think what's most interesting, Allison, about what you mentioned about this movie, which does not look like it was actually made yet, but they were making preparations for, is you've seen a new strategy by the United States and by Britain to call out each of these efforts, the movie, the other incidents they may do. You saw the British name 4 people who the Russians, they believe, would try to install as sort of an acting president if they could get rid of the Ukrainian president, Zelensky. And so what's happening is that behind the scenes, the U.S. and the British are talking among themselves about how they can take intelligence they're picking up and make it public and try to use that to prevent the Russians from acting. Of course, it's also raising questions about why they can't come out and show their sources and methods, which, of course, for understandable reasons, they're very reluctant to do. We haven't seen something like this, though, in decades.
David Sanger, Josh Rogin, thank you.
Thank you.